At the break of dawn, the savanna stirred beneath a canvas of warm amber light. The sun had barely crested the horizon, yet its golden rays already kissed the sea of tall grasses, turning dew-laced blades into glimmering threads of gold. A gentle breeze whispered through the fields, carrying with it the scent of dry earth, wildflowers, and the distant trace of something untamed. Birdsong broke the hush of early morning, sharp chirps, rolling trills, the high whistling of larks overhead. From beneath the canopy of a nearby acacia tree, a family of meerkats scurried into the open, standing tall to scan for threats before beginning their daily routine. Further out, herds of zebra and wildebeest grazed in loose clusters, the rhythmic tearing of grass beneath their muzzles blending with the subtle rustling of the wind. On the edge of this vast and open savanna, where the golden plains met the darker green shadows of the forest, Cobber stood still. He was a massive figure, towering above the grasses, his silver-streaked back a stark contrast to the shadowy hues of the tree line behind him. His eyes, dark and deep-set, watched the savanna with a quiet intensity. Cobber had seen many sunrises, but few had brought him peace. He lived alone, a deliberate choice forged by loss, his family, his troop, taken from him by the cold eyes and cruel weapons of poachers. Since then, the forest had been his refuge. The savanna, a place to observe, to remember, but not to belong. A gust of wind ruffled the silver fur on his shoulders as he knelt near a stream that trickled from the forest, cupping water in his large hands. The coolness of it grounded him, but his ears remained tuned to every sound, alert to movement beyond the brush. Farther out, in the golden grass, a small figure darted forward, unsteady but swift. Luna was barely past her first season, her legs long and thin, still learning how to carry her weight with grace. Her coat was smooth, a light tan broken by faint white stripes on her sides. She had wandered from her mother only hours before, curiosity pulling her farther than it should have. The world was wide, and everything was new. She nosed a patch of yellow flowers, then bounded forward at the sudden leap of a grasshopper. She didn't hear the low growl that echoed across the plains, soft at first, like the tremor before a storm. To the west, two shadows slinked through the grass, Scar and Fang. The brothers were born in the same litter, raised in blood and battle. Scar, older by moments, bore the namesake mark across his right eye, a testament to a violent youth. Fang, leaner but no less lethal, had a permanent snarl carved into his lips, a side effect of a deep gash from a wildebeest's horn. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, their movements synchronized and predatory. Their eyes scanned the plains. But it was not hunger alone that drove them. It was the thrill. They hunted not merely to eat, but to dominate. "Smell that," Fang murmured, lifting his nose. "Something small, new." Scar's lip curled in a grin. "Easy pickings. A lesson to the herd." They picked up speed, shoulders low, their powerful muscles rippling with every silent step. Luna felt it then, a shift. The birds quieted. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. She froze, wide-eyed, ears twitching. Her heart pounded, legs trembling, though she didn't yet know why. But instinct, older than memory, screamed at her to run. She bolted. Grass blurred around her, her hooves striking the earth in frantic rhythm. But the lions were faster, closer than she'd realized. Scar surged forward, his body low and lethal, closing the gap. And then, a sound. Not the growl of a lion, not the rustle of grass, but a deep, thunderous roar that echoed through the savanna like a clap of earth-splitting thunder. Scar skidded to a halt. Fang raised his head, startled. From the trees emerged Cobber. He moved not with speed, but with the weight of inevitability. His eyes burned with something primal, something the lions had seen only in their fiercest rivals. His chest heaved, nostrils flared, and his hands, twice the size of a lion's paw, beat against the ground as he let out another roar. This one deeper, angrier. Luna collapsed behind a patch of grass, hidden but still within earshot, watching with wide, terrified eyes. Fang took a step forward. Scar stopped him with a growl. "Not him," Scar muttered. "That one's tasted blood before." They weren't wrong. Cobber had defended his territory before, from leopards, from snakes, even from foolish hyenas that ventured too close. But lions were different. They didn't flee, they tested. Fang paced a slow circle. "He's alone," Scar snarled low. "He's enough." The standoff lasted seconds, though it stretched like hours in the still morning air. Then, slowly, Scar backed away, muscles tight with suppressed rage. Fang hesitated longer, his yellow eyes locked with Cobber's. But finally, he too turned. They disappeared into the grass, the tension breaking like a snapped branch. Cobber remained standing, his breath heavy but controlled. He did not chase. He had sent his message. Only after the lions were long gone did he lower himself to one knee. From the grass, Luna peeked out. She didn't understand what had just happened. Not fully. But something in Cobber's posture reassured her. He wasn't prey. He wasn't a threat either. Not to her. She stepped closer, trembling. Cobber turned his head slightly. His eyes met hers. A silence passed between them. A recognition. She took a step forward. Then another, close enough now that she could smell the earth on his fur. See the wisdom in the lines of his face. He made no move. Then, slowly, he reached down and plucked a piece of fruit from a low bush beside him. He placed it on the ground between them. Luna stared. A breeze passed, lifting dust and petals into the air. And the sun rose a little higher, painting the land in full light. This was no ordinary meeting. The gorilla, the loner from the trees, and the fawn, innocent and new, two unlikely souls in a world where survival ruled above all. For today, they had both survived. For tomorrow, the savanna would decide. The sun had risen fully now, its rays pouring over the savanna like molten gold. The gentle morning coolness had begun to fade, replaced by the dry heat that defined the long hours ahead. The plains, though still beautiful, pulsed with a quiet tension. Herds moved warily, birds took flight at the faintest disturbance. And silence often meant danger. Luna had returned to her herd after her first encounter with Cobber. Her mother had found her with a mix of relief and scolding. Licking her face and nudging her back into the group. The young gazelle had learned something that morning about danger, about strength, about unexpected protectors, but she was still young, still curious, still prone to wandering thoughts and distracted feet. By midday, the heat shimmered off the grass in waves. Most animals sought shade, but the herd had moved slowly toward a watering hole deeper in the savanna. Following instinct and scent, Luna trotted near the edge of the group, ears flicking at every buzz of insect and rustle of grass. Then it happened. A sharp, sudden crack, like the snapping of a branch or the thud of a rock, rang out from nearby. It was loud, unnatural, and it sliced through the calm like a whip. Luna jerked her head up. Her eyes widened. Panic bloomed in her chest. She spun, startled, and ran, without looking where the rest of the herd had gone. Without checking for her mother's scent. All she knew was that she had to move. She ran blindly, hooves beating a wild rhythm against the dry earth. Heart hammering like a trapped bird. The world blurred around her. Grass, dirt, wind, until the silhouettes of the herd were gone behind her. Swallowed by dust and distance. She didn't stop, not when the sun bore down hard. Not when the ground began to slope downward toward unfamiliar terrain. Only when her lungs burned and her legs trembled did she slow. Sides heaving, eyes searching. She was alone. Worse, she was too far from the safety of the herd's numbers. Too exposed. And someone had seen. From the rise of a grassy knoll just beyond her path. Scar stood still as stone. His golden eyes tracking her like a hawk. His black mane flicked in the breeze. And the tips of his claws twitched in the dirt. A few paces behind him. Fang crouched low, his ears flat, a growl rumbling softly in his throat. "Looks like the little one got brave again," Scar murmured, lips curling. "No one here to scream for her this time." Fang said, "No silverback to roar." They moved together, sleek and deadly, muscles coiled like springs. Luna caught the scent first, too late. She turned. They were already running. The chase was immediate. Terrifying, the kind of pursuit that turned time into a cruel trick, stretching seconds into eternities as adrenaline surged. Luna bolted. She ran faster than she ever had, zigzagging across the open field, her hooves tearing through the dry grass. The wind screamed in her ears. Her breath came in gasps. Behind her, the pounding of paws was thunderous. Inescapable. Scar took the lead, his body low and relentless. Fang kept pace, mouth open, teeth gleaming, jaws twitching for the bite. There was nowhere to hide. The plains stretched for miles, unbroken by tree or boulder or hollow. Even the termite mounds were too far away. Luna's small body was made for speed, but not for endurance. And the lions knew it. They would wear her down, let her exhaust herself, then strike. As she ran, she cried, not in words, not in sounds, but in the tremble of her steps. In the desperation of her gasping breath. Then, ahead, trees. The forest's edge. Familiar. She didn't know if her legs could make it. But she turned toward the line of green, hoping that the lions would be hesitant to follow too far into the shadows. She was only a dozen paces from the tree line when it happened. Her hoof caught a rut hidden beneath the grass. Her legs collapsed. She tumbled forward in a blur of dust and limbs, landing hard. Breath knocked from her lungs. She tried to rise, but her right leg trembled beneath her. Pain lanced through it. She froze, body quaking, knowing it was over. The lions didn't slow. They came closer, and closer, fang veering left to cut off any escape, Scar narrowing in for the kill. And then, a shadow fell over the grass. From the forest's edge, Cobber stepped forward. He had been watching from the shadows. Perched atop a low outcrop near the treeline. He had seen the chase begin. He had known, even before the lions started running, that something was wrong. He recognized Luna's form from a distance, the little gazelle with wide eyes and quiet trust. He had not planned to intervene again. But now, seeing her limp and helpless, the lion's teeth mere moments away, he no longer had a choice. He moved like thunder. Cobber didn't roar this time. He ran. His massive form erupted from the shadows, charging down the slope like an avalanche of black and silver fury. The ground quaked beneath his fists. Dust exploded behind him. Scar turned first, shocked by the sudden presence. But Cobber was faster. He barreled into Fang, striking the lion in the shoulder with the full force of his momentum. Fang was thrown off balance, skidding through the dirt with a howl of pain. Scar lunged at Cobber's back. Claws extended. Cobber spun, catching Scar's paw in his thick forearm, then swung with his opposite hand. The blow connected with a brutal crunch, sending Scar tumbling backward, stunned. Luna, still frozen near the ground, could only watch as the forest came alive around her. Cobber stood between her and the lions, broad chest heaving, arms raised, face twisted into a fearsome snarl. His eyes were pure flame. Every muscle in his body screamed warning. Fang rose, blood on his lip, but hesitated. Scar, now staggering to his feet, looked from Cobber to Luna, then back again. They weren't just hunting anymore. Now they were fighting for survival. For a moment, Scar seemed ready to leap again. But he paused. He remembered the last encounter. The fury in Cobber's blows. The strength that didn't come from numbers or hunger, but from something deeper. Something personal. He growled low in his throat. Then slowly backed away. Not today, he muttered. Fang limped after him, casting one last glance at the gorilla's towering form. Then they were gone, retreating into the tall grass, vanishing like ghosts. Cobber stood still for a long time. Only when the lions were fully out of sight did he turn to Luna. She was still on the ground, breathing hard, one leg bent awkwardly beneath her. Cobber crouched, not close enough to frighten her, but close enough to offer shelter. She blinked up at him, tears mingling with dust. He reached out, slowly, gently, with careful hands. He touched her injured leg, then pressed lightly around the joint. She flinched but didn't cry out. It wasn't broken. Cobber exhaled. He looked back toward the forest. Then down at her again. He didn't speak, of course. But something in his gaze told her what she needed to know. You're not alone. Not anymore. And though the savannah was still wide, still wild, still filled with danger, on this day, under the shadow of the trees, Luna had been saved. Again, the sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the golden plains. The heat of the day lingered in the air, thick and shimmering, while the wind carried the dry scent of grass and dust. The savannah was alive, but silent, holding its breath, as though it too sensed what was coming. Luna lay near the edge of the forest, her injured leg tucked beneath her, flanks rising and falling with rapid breath. She was still trembling, but her wide eyes stayed locked on the figure in front of her, her guardian. Her wall between life and death. Cobber stood tall. The silver fur across his back gleamed in the sunlight, and his dark form cut a sharp silhouette against the green fringe of the forest. His broad chest rose slowly, but with purpose. He was still, save for the slight twitch of his fingers and the narrowing of his eyes. His gaze was fixed ahead, on the open savannah, where danger approached. Scar was back. The lion emerged from the tall grass like a shadow uncoiling, his golden mane streaked with dust, eyes like molten brass. And this time, he wasn't alone. 3 more lions followed, 2 young males with restless energy, and a lioness, lean and scarred, her gaze cold and calculated. Behind them, Fang limped into view, his lip curled, a dark bruise forming where Cobber's fist had found him earlier. The pride had answered Scar's call. They fanned out slowly, forming a half-circle around the forest edge. Cobber didn't move. He could feel Luna behind him, hear her breath, sense her fear, and he planted his feet deep into the earth. This was his line. It would not be crossed. He took a step forward, then another. When he reached a patch of bare dirt near the middle of the open ground, he stopped, his body tensed, and then, he roared. It was a sound that tore through the savannah like thunder, deep and raw, filled with fury and defiance. Cobber beat his fists against his chest, the echoes of the impact rolling like war drums across the plains. Dust lifted with each strike. Birds scattered from nearby trees. This was not a call for help. It was a challenge. Scar snarled in response, low and guttural. His mane bristled. He stepped forward, lips curling to reveal long yellow fangs. The other lions tensed, uncertain, but Scar began to circle, slow, deliberate steps, each one testing, prodding, measuring the gorilla before him. Cobber turned slightly, following Scar's movement with calm, deadly focus. He didn't step back, didn't flinch. He met the lion's gaze with eyes like stone, unafraid, unmoving. It was a battle of wool before one of flesh. Scar was trying to get closer, to find an opening. His tail flicked with impatience. His muscles coiled, and his breathing changed, quicker, more shallow. Cobber didn't fall for it. He raised his arms again and let out another roar. Louder, angrier. It wasn't just a display. It was a warning. Primal and clear. Come any closer, and I will break you." Fang, still limping but eager to reclaim his pride, growled and surged forward without warning. His claws dug into the earth as he lunged, aiming for Cobber's side. The gorilla reacted instantly. With a roar of his own, Cobber turned and brought his fist down in a crushing arc. It met Fang mid-leap, striking his shoulder with the force of a falling boulder. The lion's body crumpled mid-air. Momentum thrown off, he tumbled into the dirt with a pained yowl, rolling to a stop several feet away. He stood up, but only barely. His front leg hung awkwardly. Blood dripped from his muzzle. The younger lions growled, eyes wide, but they didn't move. Scar roared in fury. He bared his teeth, muscles shaking with rage. He paced faster now, edging closer to the line Cobber had drawn with his stance. His pride was watching. His authority hung in the balance. But Cobber stepped forward again. Just one step, and it was enough. Scar froze. The gorilla didn't need words. His body spoke for him. He loomed like a monolith, unshaken, enormous, a creature built for war. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. Scar looked back at his pride. The lioness stared at him, tail flicking, ears flat. The younger males shifted uneasily. Fang coughed, blood on his teeth. They weren't ready. Not for this. Scar snarled again, louder this time, trying to stir courage in their bones. But Cobber beat his chest once more, and the sound rang like a drum of finality. This is not your territory. This is not your moment. This is not your victory. The lioness backed away first, her eyes never leaving Cobber's. The young males followed, hesitant, ears down, keeping their distance from Fang as they retreated. Scar remained, staring at Cobber across the divide. His face twisted with frustration, pride, and something he rarely tasted, doubt. He took one slow step back. Then another. Cobber didn't move. Finally, Scar turned, growling low as he slinked away into the tall grass, his tail lashing behind him like a whip. Silence fell again. The savanna, once holding its breath, exhaled. Cobber stood alone in the center of the clearing, his chest rising and falling in measured rhythm. He turned slowly, glancing back at the forest edge where Luna lay watching, unmoving, her face a mix of awe and gratitude. He walked back to her, each step heavy but calm now. Luna tried to rise but winced. Cobber knelt beside her, with gentle strength. He lifted her just enough to help her stand on 3 legs. She leaned into him, trusting. The lions were gone, for now, but Cobber knew they would return. Someday. Perhaps not these. Perhaps not soon. But the savanna never stayed peaceful for long. Still, the message had been sent. The line had been drawn. And as the last rays of sun spilled red and gold across the land, Cobber remained where he was, at the edge of the forest, sentinel and protector, a lone giant, a warrior, a shield. The forest swallowed the last light of day in hues of amber and violet. Shadows stretched long between the trunks, and the rustling of leaves played a quiet lullaby through the canopy above. Birds had quieted, save for the occasional coo or chirp. and the wind had softened into a breeze that barely stirred the tall grass lining the forest's edge. In this stillness, Cobber walked. His enormous hands cradled the small form of Luna close to his chest. Careful not to squeeze too hard. The little gazelle trembled against him. Every few seconds a shiver ran through her body, but she didn't resist. Fear still clung to her like dust, but some instinct deeper than reason told her she was safe now. For the first time since her legs had failed her in the chase, she had stopped running. Cobber's breath was slow and steady. His chest rose and fell in a calm rhythm, a silent drum to ease the panic in Luna's small heart. He said nothing, he made no sound, but his eyes watched the path ahead. And his steps were sure. The trees thickened, blocking out more of the fading light, and the savanna behind them melted into a memory. Cobber moved through the undergrowth like he belonged to it, following trails worn by seasons and habit. After several minutes, they arrived at a shallow glade, a hidden pool at the foot of a moss-covered rock, where the forest opened just enough for twilight to pour in through the leaves. He knelt down gently, carefully. He set Luna beside the water, where the soft earth was cool and the moss thick enough to cushion her aching legs. She blinked up at him, unsure, ears flicking with nerves. Her body wanted to bolt, to flee into the trees, but her legs were still too weak. And something in the way Cobber moved stopped her. He didn't hover. Instead, he stepped to the side, dipped his large hands into the water, and cupped some into his palm. He let it trickle slowly in front of her, an invitation. Luna hesitated. Then, leaning forward, she lapped at the water. It was fresh and cool, and with each sip, her heartbeat slowed. Cobber watched for a moment, then turned his attention to the burrs and bits of grass tangled in her fur. With slow, deliberate care, he reached out and began to pluck them away. His fingers, despite their size, were gentle. He paused each time Luna twitched, waiting until she settled again. At first, she flinched with every touch, but after a few minutes, the fear softened. His touch wasn't rough, it wasn't careless. It reminded her, strangely, of her mother grooming her after a long nap, slow, warm, patient. When he finished, Cobber walked a short distance away and knelt under a tree. There, in the shade, he collected a few overripe fruits that had fallen to the ground. He sniffed each one, pressing gently to ensure they were still soft, still sweet. Then he brought them back and laid them near Luna, one by one, forming a small pile of offerings. Luna looked at them, then at Cobber. He didn't force her. He just sat, not too far, but not too close either. He watched the last slivers of daylight flicker through the trees, his massive form silent and still. Occasionally, his eyes flicked to Luna, but not in demand, only in quiet concern. After a few moments, she took a hesitant bite. The fruit was soft and sweet, and as she chewed, her breathing finally evened out. They stayed like that for a long time. No words, no sounds but the sighing wind and the soft splash of frogs in the water. A few fireflies began to blink between the trees, their gentle light glowing like floating stars. And Cobber, Cobber remained beside her, unmoving, like a guardian statue carved from living stone. Eventually, Luna took a few unsteady steps closer to him. Her legs still shook, but her fear had lessened, and she lowered herself into the moss just a pace away from where he sat. She looked at him, uncertain what to expect. Cobber turned his head slightly, met her eyes, and then looked out over the water again. That was enough. She followed his gaze. Through a gap in the forest canopy, the last blush of sunset could be seen bleeding into the horizon. The savanna beyond, distant now, was calm, no more lions. No thunder of pursuit, no shouts of death, just golden grass waving in the breeze and the darkening sky overhead. Luna's body leaned slightly toward Cobber, seeking warmth, safety. She didn't touch him, not quite, but she didn't need to. The space between them was filled with a silent understanding. Cobber shifted slightly, his massive hand resting on the moss behind her, palm open, relaxed. He had not always been like this. Once, long ago, he had known what it was to protect, to care. When his troop was still alive. When his mate and child played among the trees. That was before the guns. Before the blood. Before the silence that followed. Since then, he had kept to himself, driven by memory and instinct, trusting no one. But this little creature, this fragile life he had saved not once, but twice, had reminded him of something he thought he had lost. She did not speak, but her presence softened the ache inside him. And so, as night settled fully over the glade, Cobber sat beside Luna, his breath calm, his heart quiet. Around them, the world breathed. Stars began to pierce the velvet sky, and the moon crept over the tree line like a watchful eye. Together, they watched, not as predator and prey, not even as protector and protected, but as two beings who had found, in the chaos of survival, a moment of peace, a fragile, unexpected friendship, born not of words, but of action, of trust, of something deeper. The savanna would always be wild. But here, in this still glade under the moonlight, it had allowed something rare to bloom. Companionship. And it began, quietly, with the beating of one great heart beside one small one. Both watching the night. The savanna awoke with its usual fanfare of light and life. Golden rays crept over the horizon, casting long fingers across the tall grass, igniting dew into glittering sparks. Birds began their songs, sharp and jubilant, while herds stirred from slumber, tails flicking, heads lifting to scan for danger. The world turned as it always had, briskly, without sentiment, but on this day, something felt different. By mid-morning, the gazelle herd had found its way back to the central plains, near a shallow stream cutting through the golden fields. They moved slowly, cautiously, still haunted by the recent lion activity, still counting the young, and then, like a breath held too long, finally exhaled. One of the elder deers let out a sharp bleat. A small, thin figure approached through the tall grass. Luna. Her steps were uneven, her right foreleg still stiff. But she moved with determination. Dust clung to her fur. A few scabs darkened her knees. and her eyes, once wide and innocent, now carried the trace of something deeper. Not fear, something else, survival, experience. Her mother rushed to meet her, pressing her nose to Luna's face, licking the dust from her brow, trembling as she nuzzled her daughter close. The rest of the herd gathered in a tight circle, murmuring in their language of snorts and gestures. They noticed the scent of fruit on her breath, the bits of cleaned moss stuck to her flank, the bruises. Yes, but also the lack of claw marks, the lack of wounds from fangs. She had been hunted, but she had not been caught. She had been saved. The herd moved around her like a shield as she drank from the stream. Her mother never more than a step away. They did not know how. They did not know by whom. But they sensed something powerful had intervened. And from that moment on, the gazelles began to speak in low, reverent tones about what had happened. That same morning, high above the grasslands on a rocky hill overlooking the forest's edge, Cobber stood. The wind tousled the silver fur along his back. His powerful arms hung at his sides, relaxed but ever ready. His face, worn by time and scarred by grief, bore a stillness that only those who had lost and survived could carry. From his vantage point, he could see the herd reuniting. He watched as Luna was surrounded, watched her mother guide her gently back into the safety of the group. He did not step closer. He did not need to. His task was done. She was safe. Cobber turned his gaze westward, toward the vast plains where the lions often roamed. The sunlight shimmered across the horizon, the heat beginning to rise. He could smell him out there still, scar and fang. But something had changed. After their defeat, the lions no longer approached the forest. They had claimed territory in other directions, hunting where the ground was open and the shadows didn't stretch so long. Scar had been wounded, not physically, but deeply, in the place where fear makes its home. And Fang, limping more heavily now, bore the visible memory of his reckless charge. The forest, once viewed by predators as merely another border to cross, had become something else entirely. A place of caution, a place watched. Stories began to circulate, first among the meerkats and monkeys, then carried by storks and whispered by jackals. Even the elephants, wise and slow to believe rumor, began to speak of it when they passed through in their great, shuffling lines. They spoke of a guardian, a beast of enormous strength, black as night and silver like moonlight, who walked alone but watched over the weak, a creature who had faced lions and did not back down. Some claimed he was a ghost, others, a fallen king of the forest, returned in a new form. Still others whispered he was a spirit of the earth itself, born from the roots and rock to restore balance. They called him many names, but all knew him by one image: the giant black gorilla who stood between the helpless and the jaws of death. Cobber. He never heard the tales firsthand, but he noticed the change. Birds no longer fled at his approach. A group of warthogs once passed him without panic. Even the monkeys in the canopy grew less wary, occasionally chattering in his direction instead of falling silent. He didn't seek their praise. He didn't want their fear. He only wanted peace. But peace, in the wild, was not a gift. It was earned, day by day, sometimes with strength, sometimes with silence. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood and gold, Cobber sat alone near the edge of his glade. The water beside him rippled gently, reflecting the first stars. A rustle in the trees drew his attention. It was nothing, just a bird taking flight. But for a heartbeat, he thought of Luna. He remembered the way she had leaned slightly against him as the night deepened. The way her small body had finally stopped trembling. He let out a slow breath. In the savannah, few things lasted. Predators circled, storms came, and grass burned. Nature was not kind. It did not love. It only endured. But sometimes, in the space between survival and instinct, something else took root, a moment of choice, of courage, of kindness, a miracle, quiet and small. As darkness settled fully over the land, the stars blinked awake one by one. The wind picked up, carrying with it the sounds of the savannah, the hoot of an owl, the distant roar of a lion, and somewhere, far below, the laughter of hyenas. Cobber remained still. He was a shadow among shadows. A hero with no tribe, no name, but the land knew, and the ones he had touched, however briefly, would remember. Luna would remember. Scar would never forget. And across the wild heart of Africa, under the moonlit sky, the legend of the silent guardian began to grow. Not because Cobber wanted it, but because even in a world ruled by tooth and claw, courage left footprints too, and sometimes, those footprints led to hope. Because nature was cruel, but in rare, quiet moments between predator and prey, between silence and storm, it could also be kind. And in those moments, miracles lived.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.